Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Manan. This is the first episode of a series that I am calling How to Find Yourself Abroad. If you don't know already, then I am originally from Pakistan. I've been living in this small little country called Estonia for the past 8 years. I am sharing in this course what I have learned about mental health journey that I have undertaken in all these years. I'm sitting right here, right now, in my small little apartment in the city of Tallinn. The past week has been crazy with snowstorms everywhere, and I haven't gone out much, just enjoying the snow from inside. So without much further wait, let's dive into the episode. So before I begin the proper content of this episode, there is one really important thing that I want to mention that might trigger some people. But, well, the thing is that mental health issues like anxiety and comparison and these things, these are rich people problems. And before you get triggered, let me just explain this to you. When I say rich, I really don't mean that you're rolling in cash, like you're a millionaire or a billionaire to be able to care about these things. But what I'm saying here is that if you are poor, if you are worried about money, if you are worried about your job, if you are worried about where the next paycheck is going to come from, then you will not be worrying about whether you have anxiety or not, because that will be something constantly on your mind. It is only when things outside become stable, things outside from us become quieter, only then we can start to notice what is happening inside and how much effect does inside have. I can give my own personal example. So when I came to Estonia for the first 2 years, I was too worried about finishing my education, settling in this place. I didn't really have any time or attention to look into myself to find out if there really are things that are bothering me. That does not mean people or poor people don't have mental health issues or they can't benefit from them. The thing is that they don't have the capacity, or let's say even privilege, to deal with these things. These things are only for people who are relatively stable in their lives, who have found majorly what they were looking for, have a stable job, maybe have a family, maybe have things, and only then they come to realize that, okay, I got mostly everything that I needed, but still there is something missing. This course is about that missing thing. So in this episode, what I really want to talk about is our parents and how do we become independent from our parents, because until we are able to become independent from them, until we cut that thread that attaches us to them, we will never be able to fully form into personalities that are uniquely our own. That does not mean that we leave our parents completely, but that does mean that we stop our attachments towards them. We stop relying on them in terms of our emotional and mental needs. And even if we do recognize those needs and we do understand them when it's causing certain toxic behaviors. So when we are living with our parents, it's common in Eastern cultures that we do live with our parents for a long time. When we are living with them, it's very difficult for us to understand what are the attachments that are holding us back, because we are still part of the same system. We are still with them. It's not independent. We cannot look at it from the outside. But when we move abroad, when we go somewhere else, when we try to live independently, only then we can start to notice the kind of attachments that we had with our parents. And those attachments, if not properly addressed, if not understood, then those attachments can manifest themselves in different areas. Most importantly, your relationships. And I see that happening all the time. It ruins relationships for men, for women, and it's something that needs to be definitely addressed. So what are the kinds of attachments that we have with our parents that become toxic and they hold us back? In this episode, I will be using some Jungian terms. If you don't know, then Carl Jung was a really celebrated psychoanalyst and therapist. He was a student of Freud. I am really impressed by his work, and some of his work, especially his studies on dream journaling, really helped me deal with my own personal attachments. And I will talk more about it later. Coming to the attachments, there are two main types of attachments. And the first one is, let's call it the mother archetype. Please understand that when I say mother or when I say father, it does not necessarily mean your mother and your father. These are roles. They can be with anyone. Your father can be the mother archetype. Your mother can be your father archetype. For example, if somebody grew up without any parents, then these roles can be manifested by somebody else as well. For example, your teachers, your aunt, your uncle. But these roles do exist in your life. First is the mother archetype, and the mother archetype is about protection. It's about nourishment. It's about caring. It's about protecting you from all the outside forces in the world. Why does that archetype become toxic? And it becomes toxic because when we are surrounded in our shell, we are protected, but then when we don't go out, we don't know what our true capabilities lie. A really good quote is that a ship is safest in the harbor, but a ship is not meant to stay in harbor. Similarly for us, when we are kids, we need this type of nourishment because our personalities are not fully developed. But when we start developing, we need to get independent. We need to move out of that protection. We need to break the shell of that protective motherly archetype that protects us. In its most toxic forms, this mother archetype can even become stifling, because a lot of times in many different cultures, I especially feel that in Eastern cultures, when actual mothers don't receive the kind of fulfillment and attention from their actual partners, then this becomes translated towards their children. And they start to hold them, they start to protect them, and they start to have attachment with them that stops them from growing. What does this do? And I'm sure you must see in your society after all that when, for example, a guy who has a severe toxic attachment with their mother, then when he goes into a relationship, when he gets married, then it becomes really toxic, because the mother cannot let go of their child who is venturing out into the unknown. The mother still wants the attention, the mother still wants to protect, and she cannot let the child go. I've seen that happening all the time in our society, and that is such a big reason for so many failures in marriage that we have seen. Okay, so moving aside, that is one form of attachment that is really bad. What is the other form? The other form of attachment, let's call it the archetypical father. And what is the archetypical father? The archetypical father is cruel, he's harsh, he pushes you to the extreme, he makes you venture out into the world. There's no kindness there, and generates fear in you, and that generates resentment in you. Now, the archetypical father does not necessarily have to be your actual father, as I said before. It can be manifestation of your culture as well. So a lot of times when we move abroad, when we are pushed abroad, then this is mainly because of this archetypical manifestation of this father, and that is what creates resentment in us. That is what creates this feeling of being controlled, of being not fully becoming our own selves. It is what creates rebellion in us. The most extreme example of this, what I can see, is that when, for example, in our Eastern culture, children listen to their parents for their advice on who to get married. Sometimes this doesn't turn out too well, and that creates such a bitterness, such hatred in the children, and they sacrifice their individuality, they sacrifice their personality to conform themselves into this perfect person, perfect son, perfect daughter. And then when it doesn't turn out according to what they wanted, this ideal marriage that they have all been promised if they listen to their parents, then it creates rebellion. So that is the second major form of attachment that we have. So how does these attachments come into play when we move abroad? So there are different stages. So let's say the first stage that we move abroad, and at least for me, was this feeling of revulsion and staying away from my society, my parents, and to be as far away from that as possible. And in this, we tend to move away from our culture, from our parents. This is also in a way controlling. This is also in a way predictable. This is not healthy, because instead of finding our own identity, instead of finding our own self, we're just moving in the opposite way from what we have been raised with, and that is still predictable. That is still not us. Creates a dichotomy within us that creates sort of like split personality, where we're just using the resentment that we had in our life while we were growing up to just take revenge from that archetype that we have within. So that is sort of like the first stage, how we deal with it. There is another stage, for example, if you have been overly attached to your parents and then you move abroad, and then this sort of attachment reverses itself. So you start to be more protective, more caring, and more controlling towards your parents from when you're abroad. And I see that happening all the time, because children sitting here tend to really control all the aspects of their parents because they have become older, and now the roles have sort of reversed. This is also really not healthy, because it creates a sort of mother archetype where we are stifling them, not recognizing that they're individuals, they're able to make their own decisions, and we don't need to control them. We can give them all the advice, we can give them all the things that they need because they're older, but at the end of the day, they're still individuals. They still have their own judgment, and we cannot force them. We cannot force them to do things, for example, during COVID, it became really a big problem that, I don't know, parents were not taking their masks and parents were not protecting themselves, and we eventually just felt bad that forcing them to do things that they're not. They have to understand how eventually the only thing that we can do and what we should do is to lay it out with them, how it is and how everything's are. Sitting from abroad, looking to where our parents are, it creates a very distorted view in our heads that is not entirely accurate. When we become too caring, then the biggest fear that starts to come up in our heads is the mortality of our parents, because we are away from them and they're away from us, and then suddenly we realize that we don't really need them and they don't really need us, and then suddenly the realization dawns on us that they are mortal, that they're going to pass away one day. And that, especially when you are sitting abroad, when you are like thousands of miles away from your parents, that is a very crippling realization. That realization can break you, and that can drive you crazy. That can drive you insane to have this realization that your parents are not immortal, that they're going to pass away.